Now, can we sustain austerity if our tax-paying publics in Europe are getting increasingly irritated? We've had changes of governments in Portugal, in Spain, in Italy, in Greece maybe, in Ireland, in France, maybe in the Netherlands very soon, maybe in Germany next year. What kind of intelligent austerity do we need to apply here? Are there any smart ideas? Yes, please. Mr. Menzies.
Well, that's quite a challenge to suggest I've got a smart idea, but I will attempt. Canada has done a strategic and operating review, and we didn't call it austerity, but it was looking at spending. And I would suggest that most countries in the world don't have a revenue problem, they have a spending problem. And we had a spending problem. As good a shape as Canada was in, we had a spending problem. We were spending too much. We promised during our last federal election that we were going to review spending. We were elected, and I would think the first country, or the first government to be re-elected in a majority situation since the recession, because we promised we were going to get our spending in order. I'm not throwing this out as a challenge, but I'm saying that Canadians accepted the fact that there was waste in government, that we could do better. What we need, and referring back to the WTO, we've seen this, we need real leadership. We need decisive leadership, but we need it quickly. We waited too long for real leadership to make the tough decisions. That's what we think that needs to happen, and happen soon.
Mr. Johnston.
Thank you. Well, I've had some Canadian experience as well, another generation, but I am not as pessimistic as many of my colleagues, and that is perhaps because I'm older and I've seen some of this before. I was in the Canadian cabinet in the early 1980s. We had 18% interest rates. We had 12% inflation, if you can imagine that today. When I went to Davos at that time, which was then called the European Management Forum, everybody had 10% unemployment. But one of the things that I'm very troubled by in the current environment is the pessimism that we're transmitting to the younger generation. I mean, I was in Greece last year, for example, and I was in Spain recently, and people are saying, you know, there's a whole generation lost. I mean, this is a decade gone. I don't believe that. I think this situation turns around much more quickly than you think, and there are examples. During my tenure at the OECD, someone mentioned the Asian crisis. Korea, as you know, was caught up in the contagion and went into the tank, had a 5 or 6% contraction in 1997, and came out 18 months later with a 6% increase, which is actually unprecedented as far as we can ascertain in the economics department. But that means it can be done. It takes sacrifice. Of course, it takes austerity to a degree, but I agree with Ted that, you know, the first thing the public want to see is are the governments doing this, which we tried to do in the early 1980s, although Ted would say there were spendthrift liberals then in government, but nonetheless, we made that effort. Those messages are extremely important, I think. What are governments doing? And when they really show that they, in turn, are taking it on the chin, the people will rally if they understand and they feel there's strong leadership. But I just don't like telling a young generation today that, forget it, the next decade doesn't belong to you, wait for another 15, 20 years, we'll be out of this. I don't believe that. I think with the right policy coordination and the kind of stimulus that Wim Kok referred to a moment ago, because intelligent spending is absolutely critical. It has to be very judicious and it has to be well directed. But we did that as well. We started a program which was much smaller than TARP at that time, but it also sent a psychological message out, which I thought was very positive.